Hey, you guys, it is me, Laura from Ticket to Learning, and I am just dealing with a few technical issues. So I'm making sure it's all working. So I'm just going to go check and make sure that we are actually live on YouTube. So let's see here. Let's see if we're live here. Checking. Yes, we are live there. Excellent. So that should be good. I'm sorry about the background. This is just what we're working with. We had some mic um, and camera issues at the last minute, so I'm just using what's here on my computer. If you guys can let me know if you can hear me all right, that would be excellent. I think everything is working pretty well. So we are going to be discussing AI for Educators by Matt Miller today. I'm really excited about this book. I feel like it is very timely and a conversation that is worth having as we homeschool our kids or just work with our kids if you're not a homeschooler, but teaching in any capacity, even if it's over the summer or whatever. What role does AI play in education? And I can't wait to talk about that. Before we jump in, while we wait for some people to join us this evening, and if you're here, please let me know in the chat. Let me know. Let's see, what am I going to have you put in? Maybe just where you're from, the state you're from. That would be great. You can put that in the chat box. It's not very original, but it works. So I apologize for needing to postpone our meeting this month. I've just been having a hard time kind of getting things together with all my health issues. I'm considering for next year, as I'm planning, a couple ideas that I'm bouncing around in my mind are that maybe we will do a quarterly book club instead of doing 6. We were doing every other month this past year, but I'm wondering if a quarterly one might work better. I'm also playing with the idea of, instead of having a live stream like we're doing today, that I might pre-record the book clubs. I might do them with other people, might be by myself, but pre-record them and then do a live premiere on YouTube. And the way that premieres work is that the video is pre-recorded, but it goes live at a set time, predetermined time. And then I can be with you talking in the chat live while the video is playing. So it would still have a little bit of a conversational feel, but it would also take some of the pressure off me if I'm having a bad day or things are really rough. I can still follow through with those set times, and it will also make it easier for me to potentially meet with authors to talk to, or other people who are experts in the field that we're studying or who might have more to offer. I feel like when I'm with someone, the book club is a lot more interesting and beneficial for you. So I would love to know your thoughts and your opinions on those things as I'm putting together the plan for the 2025-2026 school year. I was like, man, that seems like we went boom ahead, and that's because I'm skipping time. We have one more book for this year, and I forgot to bring it in here with me, but it's the Family Book Club. And the date for that should be either on our website, tickettolearning.com. If you search for Professional Development Book Club, that post should come up and it will have the date that we have scheduled for that. Or if we I don't know what else I was going to say. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and jump in. I have a lot of things tabbed, lots of thoughts and questions and things to share with you guys, but I also really want to hear from you. I don't want this to just all be about me and my thoughts. So if you have any thoughts to add, feel free to put them in the comments and feel free to join in on the conversation because it's lots of fun. And even if you're not watching this live, feel free to join the conversation because it's fun to come back and, carry on the conversation later. So this is AI for Educators. I liked that this one was nice and short. Our next book club selection is also nice and short, quick read. So that makes things really nice and easy. I also, when I went into this not really knowing exactly what to expect, I think based on reading the blurb, I didn't know if it was just going to be like ways to use AI for lesson planning or ways to use AI specifically in the classroom. And while there is a good section with a lot of specifics on those things in here, that is not what the book was entirely. I think it's just really a great thought piece jumping off. So it's not going to have like specifics of this is how you use AI, this is what's going on. It just helps you think about it because as we as educators um, work with kids, especially, I mean, if you think about the way that technology has changed, I'm 40, so it's been a while since I've been in school. When I was in school, I remember when we were starting to incorporate a lot of typing in elementary school, and I remember doing my first research project in fifth and sixth grade. I think it was fifth grade, and I did a research paper on um, George Washington Carver. And I remember we used the internet was just starting. And so there was kind of this whole we would use a lot of resources like we're moving from encyclopedias being online to being these discs that you would put in the computer and you would have the encyclopedia that way. And of course encyclopedias are just short little entries. And I remember when Ask Jeeves, that would have been a little bit later than that, but when that was starting, where we could start by typing in questions instead of trying to find specific search terms. And I remember there just being a lot of questions around how that was going to affect things and how plagiarism was going to play a role in things and just all the different things. And so now we have technology continuing to move, and some of the questions are similar or the same, some of the concerns. Will students learn how to do research from books? That was always something. And so even now, a lot of times you'll have professors or teachers say you have to have this many book resources, this many web resources, and teaching how to, I mean, media literacy is a big thing, teaching how to know if a website is reliable, if the information is something that can be cited. For example, talking about Wikipedia, something that comes up a lot. Is Wikipedia a reliable source or is it not a reliable source? All of these things. And AI is now simply added to that conversation. And I like the way that um, Matt Miller takes the approach that AI is not something to be afraid of. It's not something that we need to run away from. It's something that is very much going to be, it's in our future, it's in our present. It's something that kids are going to be interacting with on some level. So, what are we as educators going to do with that? How are we going to teach them to interact ethically? How are we going to teach them to get the most from it? How are we going to use AI as a tool to help them think even more? And I really kind of liked that approach in this book. I think he did a good job of tackling some of the challenging questions and some of the things to be concerned about, while at the same time giving us kind of uh, like a catalyst, a way to kind of branch off and use AI in a way that's beneficial for our students. So I really appreciated that. I feel like I said, I didn't know what to think going into it. I think one thing that I liked is he talks about today's glasses and tomorrow glasses, and the idea, this is on page 8, the idea that we are looking at AI right now through today's classes, but how is AI going to be used in the future? And as we begin to wrestle with AI and as we begin to look at how it's going to be helpful or how kids are going to need to use it or what they're going to need to know about it, we really have to use our tomorrow glasses. And I liked that way of kind of summing it up. I know one thing that he talked about, and this is interesting because my mother-in-law is an English professor in a college, and she, of course, I've had conversations with her about, and last summer, I think we had a pretty good conversation about how are they dealing with AI in the English department, as you know, plagiarism is definitely an issue. And of course, they have AI detectors that you can run things through. But of course, then there's also the question of when they're taking writing tests on the computer in real time, like how do they work through all of that? And all of these are questions that they're trying to ask and try and figure out the best solutions to. But I like how, I don't remember what page it's on. I don't think I marked that specifically, But this idea that, and obviously it's different if you're an English professor and you're testing for basic ability to write a composition in college versus working with homeschool students on a day-to-day basis. I liked his challenge that think about why we're using writing and what the point is, and how can we use actually AI to help develop writing in our students. How can we use it to help them develop their grammar and their vocabulary and their understanding of how to build an essay, what makes a good essay, of how to share their thoughts and opinions in writing. I think one thing I tend to sometimes when I'm writing, especially when I'm doing personal correspondence via email, I've always struggled with that a little bit. I have not been diagnosed. However, my counselor and my doctor both think that I am likely on the spectrum. And sometimes when I'm communicating, especially via email in like a way that feels personal to me, I tend to word vomit. And it's not because I'm trying to, it's not because I don't know how to write. It's because I'm afraid that I'm going to leave out pieces of information that are really important to the person. But then my communication is too long, especially when I'm trying to write posts for Instagram or things like that. It's really hard. And so I'm using AI to help train me how to what information is important, what people need to know. Sometimes I'll even go into ChatGPT and I'll say, "Can you help me make this sound less autistic and more neurotypical?" And I'm using it not, I very rarely actually use what it spits out, but it helps me to see a new framework that I can work from and then learn how to write that way. And I think this is something that we can use with our students as well. Maybe they can even plug in some of their writing and get feedback, and we can teach them how to use that feedback in a way that it's helping them to write. They're not using the actual exact thing that the bot pops out, but using it as kind of a tutor right there with them, alongside them. And I think some of those uses of AI can be really, really helpful. I know for some people, brainstorming on their own is difficult, but brainstorming with somebody works well. And AI can kind of be that body double there to kind of help them process and think about, okay, how can I get through the brainstorming? What can I write about? How can I do this in a way that will work? And I think that's a really cool idea for a way to use AI. And of course, um, on page 27, I have this underlined. It says AI, this is for teachers, not for us how to use with students, but for teachers. AI will help us scale up the essence of what makes us teachers to bigger, broader levels. Instead of spending so much time on menial, trivial tasks, we'll be able to dedicate more of that time to what matters most. And that would be things like if we're lesson planning, say, hey, I have these things. Can you break them down into a 4-day-a-week schedule? Those kinds of tasks AI can do pretty quickly, pretty well, and save us a lot of time. Or, hey, I have this curriculum. Can you this is how many lessons are in it, this is how long the lessons are, can you break it down into a chart for me? It can also help you brainstorm ideas or come up with things to help with your lesson planning. I'm sure it could even probably help find resources, although you have to be careful with that, because a lot of times I was really excited about using it to help me find books and resources, but it makes a lot of things up, books that don't exist. And that's frustrating. But as long as you're double checking and working with things, it can give you a jumping off point to save. And I'm curious, for those of you joining us, whether live or later, what are some ways that you have kind of toyed with using AI in your homeschool or in your home? Because that crosses over. I know someone who for a while put in ingredients that they had in the house and would have AI make them a like a menu for the week, or recipe lists or things like that AI can be really good at. And what that can do is that can buy us some time that we can then put into either spending more time with our kids or into planning deeper things that AI can't really do for us. And I think teaching our kids and talking to our kids about how we're using it is also really important. So one section that I really enjoyed was started on page 33, and I'm just going to read through some of the main points that he had here. And this says that paper and pencil is a stopgap with lots of concerns. So he's talking about this idea of people who are afraid of AI just kind of going over completely to paper and pencil, because we want to know what the student thinks, we want just the student. And so these are kind of some of the issues with just going back to paper and pencil. He said, one, paper and pencil can create more barriers demonstrating understanding than it removes. So this is something that, especially in my work and in the creation of Ticket to Learning, working with my kids, I have, and tutoring kids with dyslexia, and dysgraphia and all of those things. When we are asking a student for written feedback, of course, we're trying to teach to write. But outside of that direct context, we're wanting to know what they know about the information. We're wanting to give them opportunities to engage with the information that they're learning. And for some students, the act of writing is so stressful and so difficult that if we require them to write everything with pencil and paper, that blocks their ability to learn the materials, to interact with the materials, to engage with the materials on a higher level. And so it's always important to have other options. One of my students in particular really, really struggles with writing. And that's something that we've had to spend a whole lot of time on. But it's also something that we had to work up to. We would start with, once he was able to write, which was delayed compared to where you would expect to see most students, we had to start with, okay, I can get him to write one sentence a day without completely breaking down. Where across all of the subjects that we're doing are we writing that one sentence? And that would be it. And I would not require any other written work for that. And then we slowly worked up over time the amount that he was able to do. And now he's able to do quite a bit, although it's still really hard for him. So I have to think, okay, what is the primary purpose of each assignment? And sometimes physically writing it or even typing it is just, it doesn't make as much sense. And I think as we think of AI, what are the barriers that that's going to put up to some students if we say, okay, we're taking the computer away because we don't want you to cheat. So now you have to write everything by hand. That can really kind of be counterproductive. The second thing that he talks about is resourceful students can still find ways to access the tools you're trying to avoid. And I think this is just across the board. Are you going to be someone who says, no, we're not going to have that? It can be a problem. Or are we going to say, okay, we're going to work together to learn ways to use this tool in a way that's going to be beneficial. We're going to learn how to use this tool in a way that can be helpful, and we're going to do that together. Number 3, paper and pencil slow down the feedback loop. So the idea here is that, and this isn't as much of an issue that we're dealing with when we're homeschooling, but his idea is that you have a student write something in pen and paper, they turn it in, and then you as a teacher have to grade it and then get it back to them. And then the feedback loop is really, really slow. Whereas the digital feedback loop can be much quicker. Of course, as we're homeschooling, we can give that feedback immediately to our child, regardless of what format that they use. His fourth argument is that it's not very authentic for our future. So the reality is that we have AI. And my guess is that AI is going to be actually required more and more in the workplace because it does produce efficiency. And I expect that more employers are going to require that students have some sort of knowledge of AI and how to use it. So again, how can we do that? And I think it's okay that we learn some of this with our students, and that we understand that this is new and we're all learning it, and there will be some mistakes and some, okay, let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's go back to the drawing board and try this instead. And a lot of that process itself is actually beneficial and helpful for students to see. And the thing that I really, really enjoyed that he brought out here, which is something that we use a lot in our homeschool personally, is discussion. And the idea that if you're having a discussion with your student, that can actually be a lot more beneficial and bring a lot more learning to them than if you are simply having them write things down. And this is because you've got multiple perspectives, then there's more challenging happening to the way that they're thinking and what they're doing. It's not just them showing, oh, this is what I know. It's them actually being able to hold and carry a conversation. And that's actually a higher level of thinking than simply writing a paper. I think that I really liked in here, there was one place where he has a lot of suggestions where he recommends letting your child actually debate or have a discussion with AI about a certain topic. And I think that that is really fun. And it could be something that you could do with multiple people and seeing things from different perspectives, because it's having those additional perspectives and additional insights and additional things that actually challenge thinking and either help a student to become more firm in the way that they're thinking, or to question if maybe They have some holes in their thinking that need to be filled. And I think that that can be really powerful and something that AI can help with in a really fun way. And even if you see, like, if AI spits some stuff out, sometimes the stuff that AI spits out is just crazy and wild. But for students to recognize that and be like, whoa, that's crazy. And to then go and find a source and confirm that their thinking is correct and to tell AI, like, wait a second, this isn't right. Like, that can be a deeply, deeply, like, it can just really help them to really engage in the material in very deep ways. Um, I in chapter see what chapter is it? Chapter 4, he gives 30 ways AI can support teaching and learning. Of course, he's got the debate that I just talked about. There are so many ideas. Not all of these are going to apply to homeschooling, but most of them can also be used in a homeschooling setting. I liked this one that he had. Use AI for insight into big, difficult to solve problems. So if there's a math problem, if there's a coding problem, if there's something like that, I think it was so cool. One of my kids came up to me, was it yesterday or the day before? And he was like, "Hey, mom, I started using Perplexity," was the AI model that he was using. "Perplexity is teaching me how to code. Look at this game that I made." And he just with Perplexity and himself, he figured out how to create this game where he's like jumping over these, it's like a ball that jumps and has these platforms. And then if it falls, it lands on the spikes totally from scratch. And he figured that out by using Perplexity to help him. That's something that I wouldn't have been able to do. And he has done coding classes before, but kind of he got to a place where he wasn't quite old enough to go up to the next classes or quite ready for that intensity yet, but he'd done everything for all his age group. And then now he used Perplexity to kind of help him with that stopgap. And again, completely on his own, not, you know, not with my help at all. I know my husband, even with his programming, sometimes he'll use Perplexity to double check his work or to ask a question to help him program things. And I think that the cool thing about AI is that it can show you an answer, but usually it will tell you how it got to the answer. And you can even ask it, okay, so how is this the answer? And it can walk you through step by step. So things like math, things like science, things that are really tricky. Perplexity can help, or not just Perplexity, AI. I use ChatGPT. My husband uses Perplexity. Well, there's so many models and there's going to be more. And but just learning which ones are better for what types of things and how to get them to help you in your understanding. I think that's a really good way to model using AI. So another thing that it talks about is empowering students to make a difference in the world. So yeah, so this has an example where I'm just going to kind of read to you about this one because I don't have as much personally to share. But the example here, he has a quote that says, "A student loaded a social entrepreneurship project from last year and asked ChatGPT to find everything wrong with the solution. It did, and he used the list of flaws to redesign the project and build a new prototype designed to connect grandparents and their grandchildren." So the idea is that if students have an idea or a project or something they want to do, or even a paper or anything, they can load it into ChatGPT and say, "Help me find everything wrong with this." And yes, it can be used for grammar and things like that that we see with Grammarly. Grammarly is a form of AI, but how can it help them with their flawed thinking or flawed reasoning or holes or gaps that they might not recognize so that they can actually strengthen their arguments, their papers, their projects? And I think that that's a really neat way also is to, and see, this is something in education in general. A lot of times, and I was this way growing up, I wanted to turn in a paper and I wanted to get 100%. I wanted it to be right. I didn't like making mistakes or being wrong in any way. Whereas I think AI can help us to transform that in our students so that we see it as a learning process, and AI can be part of that process. So we're not expecting to, no matter how much work we put into it, we're not expecting that our finished product be perfect or flawless, but that we're expecting this to be a process, and that AI can help us to see some of those flaws or some of those mistakes that we've made and can challenge us to better them even more. I know that I used to get really frustrated when people sometimes, and I've heard other people, I know this is common, but you sometimes get something wrong and you're like, "I just want the right answer. I just want the right answer." But if we move past that, like, actually the goal is not to get the right answer, the goal is to understand. I think AI can really help with that process and making that kind of the new normal in a sense. I don't know, maybe that's just wishful thinking, but I think that could be really cool. Again, this talks about asking for work feedback, which is similar to what we talked about. So this says, for example, if you have a student who's got a project that has a rubric with it, have the students enter the rubric, have them enter the project and ask AI, how'd I do? What do I need to improve on this? And I think what this can do is we need to see this not as a way of cheating, but a way of helping students to build the quality of work that they're producing. Because this is something that you would have to have someone personally check and go through. And there are times that we do that. There are times that we have peer reviews. There are times that we have someone else say, hey, can you look over this for me? And AI can kind of help in those ways. And I think that that's another positive use of AI. Let's see, I'm just making my way through the notes. And this is, yes. So this is one thing I thought. So there's this chart on page 81, and I think you can also get this on his website, which is ditchthattextbook.com, I think. Yeah, ditchthattextbook.com. So this is talking about plagiarism. Like, where do we cross that line of AI being plagiarism versus AI being helpful? And he has this kind of continuum. And the questions that he has for them are, which of these would you consider cheating? Which of these are relevant to our students' future? And which of these would you use in your work as an adult? So kind of 3 ways to look at them. And one thing that he talks about with all of these things is if you plug into these different prompts, how you would feel if there was another student who was doing this with your student instead of AI, would that change things? And so it starts out from, I'm going to start with AI, fully AI generated to fully human generated. And kind of the question is, where in here do you see things cross over into the line of plagiarism? So student plugged a prompt into AI, copied the response, and submitted it to the teacher. I don't think any of us would doubt the fact that that is definitely plagiarism. So AI created a response and the student read it, edited it, adjusted it, and submitted it. Is that considered AI? I mean, is that considered plagiarism? In my mind, that's still in the plagiarism mark because this is not the student's original ideas. This is the student editing the AI's ideas. That might be different for different people, but that's how I see that. Then we have student created multiple AI responses and used the best parts of them and edited them and submitted them. So again, to me, that would be like akin to someone writing a report and taking pieces from different sources, but not citing their sources. To me, that would kind of fall under that category. That's how I would view that. Then we have student writes the main ideas and the AI generated a draft and offered feedback to improve. So for you, does that cross the line over to where you've got the student saying, here's the main points, here's the main ideas. This is kind of giving an outline, giving a draft. And then AI gives a draft and says, here's things that you can do to change your main ideas to make them better. Is that crossing over the line into plagiarism? And then we have student consulted internet and AI for ideas and then wrote and submitted their own paper. And then we have student wrote all the assignment content without consulting AI or the internet. So the question is, at what point do we cross the plagiarism line there? And that's a little murky in some of the areas, and something that will become, I'm sure that over time we will learn how to better work with that and where to draw the line for those things. And I know that some students, some teachers in college will make that clear. Some college professors encourage the use of things like Grammarly and AI in those areas. Others don't. And I think that that's going to be a little bit all over the place. So I think now it's important to as we work with our students to make sure that they understand what the professor is expecting of them, so that they don't run into any trouble. Let's see. Yeah, and then this also talks about the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization and how they have adopted the recommendation on ethics of artificial intelligence. It's a 44-page document, but you can definitely check that out. There's links, more information to that in the book on page 93, where you can find out what ethical standards are being set now, where they're going to discuss things like plagiarism and other things. And I'm sure that that's going to be developed more over time as we continue to see AI being used in more contexts and as we begin to understand it. I have here underlined on page 94, it says, the more you probe an artificial intelligence tool with queries, the more flaws you'll expose. This doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't use artificial intelligence because it has gaps, biases, and inaccuracies. It just means we need to be aware of the system so we can interpret the results and use what it produces in an appropriate way. And this is where it comes down to really embracing and using AI with your students. So AI is going to give you wrong answers. It's going to give you biased answers. There's algorithms that it's following. It's going to give different answers based on having conversations with you as a specific user in the past and the answers that it perceives that you're looking for. All of this is going to affect it. And I think it's really important, just as we have on the internet taken time and we're careful to help our students recognize what are safe websites, what are reliable websites, all of that, and how to interpret all of that. I think we're going to have to approach AI similarly. How do we know if this information is good? How do we fact check what the AI is saying? How do we go back and make sure that what it's telling us is ethical or good? And kind of making sure that we're using AI with our students and understanding that this is flawed and that it is a good idea point, but we can't just completely trust everything that we're getting from AI as truth because the AI said it. One thing that I try to teach my students is that they can use AI to get ideas and to learn things, but they always have to have a reputable source that they're citing. So if AI spits out some information to them, they can ask AI, give me a source for this, and then they can go check that source. Is that source reliable? Is it a good source? Is that actually what that source says? If so, then they can cite that source, that original source. And so I think teaching a lot about original documentation and original sourcing and citing where things come from is really important. One thing that the author does all throughout this book that I actually really like is at the end of each chapter, he gives a summary of how much was created. This chapter was 90% created by human and 10% artificial intelligence. And then he tells how he used artificial intelligence to help him write that chapter. I think that that is a really great way to, it's not that I think that that's going to be required for everything, but I think as someone who is a scholar, as someone who writes academic curriculum, and as someone who has seen a lot in the journalism field and things like that, I think transparency of where we're getting our information is important. And so teaching our kids from the beginning to be transparent about their usage of AI can be a really good skill and a really good way to help them kind of think about if this is a good way to use AI or not. I think that is just a really, I don't know. I think that starting out that way, especially now as we're learning AI and figuring it all out, that can be a really, really helpful tool. And one thing he talks about is the idea between and the fear that AI is going to take away humanity. And he says on page 111, the proliferation of AI doesn't mean we don't need humans anymore. AI can do the basics for us so we can spend more time on higher level tasks, planning and realizing our vision. So basically his argument is that the things that make us human, the creativity, the humanity, the love, the compassion, the empathy, all of the feelings and emotions and creativity and ideas that we have that make us human, AI can free up more space to do those things. So whether it be in our teaching, in our schoolwork, whether it mean that some of the things that are really hard for your kids, that doesn't mean that you don't spend time. Like, for example, writing. If writing is really hard for your student, like it was for my son, that doesn't mean that we don't write and that we don't build those skills. We still work on those skills separately, but we don't let those skills, we can use AI more to help in all the other areas, the learning be deeper so that those skills aren't getting in that way. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And then the last thing that I have marked here is, it's just more talking about what does it mean to be a person and what's it mean to be human and how is that different from AI. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. I feel like it got me thinking a lot. I've been a little unsure of what to do with AI, but I think it helped me to have a more positive thought toward it and realizing that really just like we do like I've said so many times already, like we do media literacy and teaching internet safety, teaching internet usage, teaching what good resources are, how to do all of this like media literacy, and reference and all of that kind of stuff. This is just another tool to tie into that toolbox. And I think as it grows and develops and as we use it, that will become clearer. I did want to, before we end, so since this book has been written, one of the big cons of AI that has come up fairly recently that we understand, and this one really bothers me a lot actually, is the environmental impact of AI. And I think that that is not something that we want to avoid, or that I think that's something that has to play into the conversation. Currently, the way AI works is the amount of resources and heat it takes uses so much water to power these AI stations where you've got the computers doing all the work, to the point where some of the communities that are close to these plants don't even have drinking water. There's just not water because these computers are using up so much water to cool the systems from all of the running and the work that they're doing. Now, do I believe that that will get better over time? I hope so. And I think that they can find ways to reduce that impact. But while that, until they get to that point, I am very leery of using AI unless I need to. So being very intentional with the way that I'm using it. And some of the things that I do to do that are, when I'm doing a web search, mostly I don't need the AI little thing that pops up on the top. So I'll do my search terms and then I'll do minus AI, and then it's not using that when I'm not needing that. I will also, I don't actually have a paid version of ChatGPT, which is what I use the most. And the reason that is because that limits the amount of queries that I can do at their highest level. And when I use those queries up, I don't do anymore. I just leave it there because I don't want to overuse. I don't use it every day. I try to be very intentional about how I have it for my kids, but that is something that I don't like. I try to be very environmentally conscious. And I think especially for me, for those of you who followed along with my health journey, there are some more disposable things that I'm having to use. There are more things that are not as eco-friendly as a result of my medical stuff, and I don't like that. And so trying to reduce my impact in other ways as much as possible is important to me. And so every time I use AI, I just, I know that this is going to make an environmental impact. But I think that, and I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? Does that make you not want to use AI at all? I also know that AI is a thing, and like we've talked about, it is important for us to teach our children how to use it. And if we just say no AI, they can't learn how to use it properly. So that's my biggest thing that I'm wrestling with currently. And I would like to know from you guys, if you are still here, let me know in the comments a couple things. I'd love to hear how you do and how you have used AI in your home, in your school. Are there assignments that you've done with your students that you wouldn't have been able to do without AI? I would love to hear all of that, as well as what your plans are for incorporating this type of education into your homeschool. I'd also like to hear what your reservations are, your concerns are, and we can continue this conversation even after we close out this evening. We can continue that conversation in the comments for as long as we need to, but I think this is a conversation that is important to have. And I think it's also important to understand that people are going to have strong opinions sometimes on AI, and that's okay. It's new. I think it's important that we give people room to wrestle with those things and to share and understand that this is new territory that we are all trying to figure out and understand the best ways to use it to help us in our lives, to help our kids, and what impact. I mean, we can't predict what impact it's going to have on our future, but we can start seeing things popping up. And how can we prepare our kids for that future? So I think that is all that I have for this evening. I am really glad that you guys picked this one. I wasn't sure about it at first, but I think it is really good. I appreciate it. I know Matt Miller has a lot of other books for educators that I've looked at before. And so he's definitely an author worth checking out if you want more information, like more books on education for teachers and things like that. He's got a lot of great stuff. Definitely check out his website, which is ditchthattextbook.com, and you might find some more resources. I know there's more resources that go with the book there, and I'm sure there's other resources in general. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the book club for next year. What are some ideas for formatting? What works well for you guys? And I'd also love to know if there's any books in particular that or topics that you would like us to cover. And it has been great meeting with you guys. I hope that you have a great day. I look forward to hearing more from you in the comments, and I will talk to you later. Bye.